My name is Bilal Phillips. Bilal, the son of Bradley Phillips, who was born in Jamaica in the 40s, raised in Canada. My parents migrated to Canada and I grew up there, Toronto. Toronto before there were immigrants and others. I was the only black kid in my junior high school and my high school. My childhood was, just trying to do what everybody else was doing. I didn't have any particular sport. I did running, and I did play football. That is not soccer, but Canadian football in high school. It was a childhood trying to adjust with being the odd man out. You're the only black kid. It means that the racism that is there in the society, subtle, not open, but subtle. I'm sure it's nothing like what people go through in the States, but still, feeling odd, out of place, but trying to adjust at the same time. And I got through it without major scars. You are what they call the visible minority, a very visible minority. So, but still, I lived within that framework, like everybody else, dating, going to parties, engaged in activities, school activities, having friends. I had friends, good friends, and, I'm not complaining about it in any kind of a major way, really. Well, a part of my childhood, actually, after graduating from high school in North York, my family moved to Malaysia. So, East Malaysia in particular, the area called, or state called Sabah, and the city Kota Kinabalu. It was no different, really, from Canada. There were Christians there. Of course, Malaysia was a British colony, but I hung around mostly with expatriates who were there. So their way of thinking, etc., was the same like, it was in North America. So I went to school there, I had finished high school already, and I was preparing for A-levels in order to go into university, right? University of Toronto. Actually, I was preparing to go there. But it didn't work out. I really, distance learning, I guess, just wasn't my thing. I was enjoying myself too much. My parents had got me a motorcycle, so I was, just having a good time, sort of thing. So I wasn't putting in the type of time needed to do the studies. So I remained there for about 2 years, half studying, until Simon Fraser University was set up, and here was a school you could go in with high school, just grade 12, This is the days before you had grade 13, because I left at grade 12, right? So my parents then sent me to Canada, to Vancouver, to study in Simon Fraser University. In Simon Fraser University, I entered into a period of turmoil, student activity. They became the most active, politically active student body in the whole of Canada. They were mainly protesting against the war in Vietnam, Canada's role. Canada was producing the napalm which they were dropping on the Vietnamese. So though they were saying they were not in the war, but they were producing the bombs that the Americans were dropping on the Vietnamese, And this is terrible stuff. Napalm is very terrible, consequences. So students were protesting. They wanted Canada to stop it, stop producing this stuff, and the situation in Simon Fraser, it was at the peak. Simon Fraser was, at that time, innovative. It was doing something which no other university in Canada was doing. They had, 3 semesters. They had a lot of American professors that came up. They were following the American system, the credit hours, and it was something new. It was sort of experimental. The classes were more, loose. The professors were, very, you could say sociable. We'd sit at round tables and discuss things with the professors. It's not like just the professors down there, all the students are up in the bleachers kind of thing, and he gives his class and he leaves, right? No, this was a really upfront, in-your-face kind of educational system that they were using. So the professors were, for the most part, radical. They were the ones also feeding these ideas. Many of them were draft dodgers that came out of America, many of the students. The Simon Fraser's basketball team, its football team was like the best in Canada because most of the team players were Americans. They were bringing in Americans, so they were, they led, the other universities. So anyway, in this time, with this time of turmoil, I sort of came to the forefront because I was involved a lot in the academics, etc. This was the time of, in America, it was, the Black Panthers and the struggle with so I became black leather jacket and with the beret and big afro, and, I was the figure, that ended up on the student newspaper covers and, representing the struggle. So it was a different, but I was in the middle of it all. I was in there in the debates, the discussions, and communism was being fed in there, subtly. And I heard enough of it to decide that, hey, I think I want to be a communist. Communism is the answer. We can change the world with communism, make it a just place. I was reading about history now, because after growing up, you're sort of insulated. Jamaica's island, anyway, as a little kid. Growing up in Toronto, you're still sort of like an island. You're not aware of the rest of the world and what's happening, So now I'm reading, understanding the struggle in America, civil rights, and, the issue of the Indians and how they were massacred, and, these kind of things, oppression, capitalism, and then, communism was the answer. It will establish brotherhood, equality, justice, etc., etc. So I decided to become a communist. And from there, I went down to the States. I joined some of the communist political movement activities there, the Soledad Defense Committee. I joined that. I was a part of those helping to fundraise for the Soledad brothers who had been jailed, and it's a whole story in and of itself. With Angela Davis. Yeah. Angela Davis. At the time, I was sitting in those discussions with her and all this. Communism assumes that human nature is changeable, that whatever nature we have is what we pick up from the society around. So the communist ideal was a person who would work according to their ability and take according to their need. This is the ideal communist man or person. In the course of my study there, I had gone back down to Malaysia for a stretch. I took a break, I think 1 semester off or something like this. And I got into music, right? Actually it started in Toronto before I went, but they reached a kind of a peak there, and I formed a group, called the the experience, right? I was into Jimi Hendrix, so I used to have the Jimi Hendrix hat. You know, there's a particular hat he used to wear, and you know, I was guitar lead singer, you know, of this group, right? Jimi Hendrix, really, Jimi Hendrix. I was called the Jimi Hendrix of Malaysia. They take off, right? So, I mean, I was into that quite a bit. Came back to Vancouver, and it's kind of shifted because, you know, R&B was more popular, so I shifted more into that, though still liking that. Coming out to Toronto, when I came back up from Toronto, I still did it, you know, as a means of gathering people for the rallies and things. You know, they use music as a part of it. And I also made money from it. I used to play in nightclubs in, you know, Yonge Street and, you know, yeah. So that element was there in my life at the same time, but secondary. Primary was really political. This is my political thinking. And after being there for a while, I came to see that the communist principles that were agreed on were not really being implemented, you know. And the people involved were not really that disciplined. And I felt kind of disappointed, you know. So I went back to Canada, went back up to Toronto. And there in Toronto, I joined a group here, which was political, nationalistic, you know, it's called the Black Youth Organization. And still espousing communist values and ideas, but concerned with the national Africa, things connected to Africa and these kind of things. Like a guru type, you know, that's how he carried himself. In those days, he was wearing full thobes and he had a walking stick and, you know. So he was telling me, you know, as we had our discussions these days, he would tell me, you're going to become a Muslim. I said, no way. No way. And in my mind, I said, just because he said that, I'm definitely not going to become a Muslim.